Just before we ask the next question, just briefly, in case the person who wrote the question weren't the two of you, there was a bill about reading curriculum on page 14. Are doing model reading curriculum for our literacy center. So if that was the question that was being asked about, I think we all agree that making sure we have good reading curriculum for all our students is very important throughout the state. We also did curriculum this year, model curriculum on Indigenous people, which Eastern Connecticut is really proud of, because folks, again, the Mystic Massacre occurred, it's a fact, it happened, but if you didn't go to school, maybe in Eastern Connecticut, maybe you didn't learn about this very important Connecticut history. So each school will be given the model curriculum for Native American studies for Connecticut. The 4 tribes are going to be making that model curriculum together, our 4 state recognized tribes. And then the schools will be able to receive that information, hopefully distribute that to the students so they get a full learning of our Connecticut history.
Kevin Markoff from Groton. Representative Cruz, I want to talk about the heavy vehicle use tax that you voted for. I sent you an email explaining how it was bad for my business because I run tractor trailers, and that bill did not include Class 7 vehicles, which are tri-axle dump trucks, which can basically haul the same weight I can. Now, the loaded weight is going to be 10 cents a mile on a tractor trailer, and I'm guessing the unloaded is 2.5, according to what I can find on this. It's very unclear how it's going to be, how you're supposed to figure it. But I want to know why you voted for it, without trying to make some amendment for Class 7 vehicles, because you put me at a big disadvantage, because they don't have to pay that. So you're talking, if a truck does 500 miles a day, that could, on average, half loaded, half empty. We have 3 trucks that are tractor trailers. That could cost $24,000 a year. So,
dollars that of shovel-ready projects that have to get done. My fear has ultimately come true. You will be on an island with a gasoline vehicle because the folks that can afford electric cars will not pay. The folks, the larger corporations that are buying electric trucks probably will not pay. The only way that I saw that could happen was through tolls, but there's also a gap that has to be covered. And the only way we can do it, and just so folks understand, there's a humongous infrastructure package that they're talking about down in Washington. All the other states around us have a way of capturing money that we don't, and they're looking for any way that they can find it. I don't think it was the best way.
With the tolls thing, I'm asking you the question about the bill, which puts my business at a disadvantage. I mean, we've been in business. Next month will be 90 years doing this. And you've just put us at a huge disadvantage because we're going to pay a tax that somebody else isn't paying. I mean, I don't even understand why the state went with this. You might as well have just went up on diesel 30 cents a gallon tax. Instead of doing that, that way everybody that's trucking would pay. So you've created another bureaucracy that has to take care of this, and I don't even know how you would enforce it because you can't audit. If you're going to audit somebody, you're going to have to go to their home base. So if you're going to audit J.B. Hunt, you're going to send somebody from DRS out to Arkansas to do that? I mean, it was just a bad bill. And part of it, you have to know the weight of what you have. And a lot of trucks don't know the weight of what they have. I watched the debate in Representative Scanlon, I think. He says, all trucks have scales in them. That's untrue. Hardly any trucks have scales in them. You don't know your weight. So a lot of times you carry things in a dump truck by volume, like mulch and other things that you don't weigh it because you know you're not exceeding the weight limit. You truck it by the yard. So how do you, this bill is just a disaster. I mean, and how can you help fix it? Is what I want to know.
They did the fix for the milk.
Yeah.
They couldn't do.
But you're in manufacturing. You should be not like it anyway because you have to bring raw material in. and truck it in, and then your finished product you're gonna truck out. So you're gonna pay both ways that way, and it puts you at a great disadvantage with somebody in another state that's bidding against you for a product. So I mean, why would you vote for something like that?
And in the ultimate end, there's a $69 billion infrastructure deficit.
So you put it all, $69 billion all on the trucks.
No, it's not all on trucks.
But yeah, it is. I mean, trucks represent 7% of traffic out there, and they pay 34% of the bill. And I think, they should pay. We should pay more because we're making money on it. But I mean, you can't just dump it all on the trucking industry.
A lot of the damage happens with heavy trucks. I mean,
And you're right, and that's why Class 7 should have been included, because they do more damage than any tractor trailer, because you have the weight more concentrated in one area. That's like a jackhammer going down the road. But you didn't include. That's why I'm wondering, why would you vote for that?
I voted for it because, again, with the big infrastructure bill that's coming through, we have all these we talk about modeling what other states do. We're the only state in New England without a toll. We're the only state on the eastern half of the country almost without a toll. The only way we can raise money is through our gas tax. Again, I think we will have to work on that bill. We will change it because the more electric cars that come into play, the higher that goes, the worse off we are. We're falling into the exact situation I talked about. I mean, this is a very complex issue. I get it, but we do need to address these issues with our roads. And the heavy trucks are the trucks that do the most damage. And the only way that they try to do the tolls just on the
Class 7 trucks were not included. They do the most damage because of the weight's in a concentrated area.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they can't be added at a later date, because
there you go. That's what I'm asking.
But this was to me, this was an initial way to handle an issue that we needed to close the gap with some funding in regards to the transportation fund. And we're going to learn from this. And what you say and what you just said in regards to why didn't we add that truck? Well, now we have a responsibility.
And that's why I sent you the email to talk about it. I gave you my phone number. You just sent that thing about closing the gap. I mean, I've watched you. You voted for the against the Police Accountability Act because I read in the paper you said you had spoken to people that knew about it, and you thought you didn't think it was the right bill. Well, I know about trucks. Why didn't you call me? I mean,
I may not have talked to you, but I promise you that was
who did you talk to? I mean, that obviously somebody that doesn't know.
Well, you said I'm in manufacturing. I talked to all those trucks and the guys that drive, not just guys drive them, but the companies that own them. We all understand.
Here's a company that's in your district. I mean, we've been there, same road for 90 years. So
I think we can see a couple more hands for folks who have other questions. But I did, and this is another case where Joe voted. He told you why he voted the way he did. I understand you disagree. Anthony said, why he voted yes the way he did, and says he wants to learn something new from you today. So I'm sure he appreciates that in Class 7 truck. I voted no on that bill.
I appreciate that too.
Because I felt like we had enough money this year in the budget between federal funding and our state budget was healthy enough that we could continue to discuss this further, and I wasn't ready to vote yes on that current bill. We all have different feelings, and we all have different thoughts, and the woman with the dark eyeglasses has the microphone. But if you'd like to say something else, sir, please raise your hand, and Emily will be bringing the microphone around to everyone.
Hello, my name is Chris Kuhn, and I'm from Mystic, and my interest is in environment and climate and energy issues. And I want to say again, thank you for working together as a threesome as far as the expanding of the rail services. I also want to say that I'm very proud to be from Groton and to have had the support of the mayor and the town council and many local businesses to ban the use of single-use plastic bags and certain straws, the assumption of the use of straws, and basically the issues, the effort to address plastics as an environmental hazard. And I'm wondering about various environmental bills that came up this time. The expansion of the bottle bill was fantastic. There were bills that didn't even come to a vote, and one of them was related to polystyrene. So if you want to address that, as well as maybe Senate Bill 882, the zero carbon energy grid. There were numerous others, and would love to have contact with the three of you in the future, because I very much appreciate your representing us.
Yeah, the bottle bill was a long time coming, and I think the fees on bottles haven't been raised since someone told me that the 80s.
Yeah.
The 80s. So we made some good progress finally on that bill. I co-sponsored the polystyrene bill, I believe. I think there's ways to go. I think a big issue that we saw on how do we get these 6,000 bills that, again, every bill has someone who thinks it's a good idea, whether or not that person is me, but a lot of these environmental bills I think are really good ideas. How do we get those down to the 180 that eventually passed and got signed? And there's an unfortunate time issue that we have. The Environment Committee, which I don't sit on, does anyone sit on that? You sit on that? They worked so hard on that bottle bill, and they put so much effort into the bottle bill, which was a good thing, well-deserved. And we saw members, the person who sits right by our office is telling us about it every day.
Yeah.
They worked so hard on that other things, unfortunately, they can't do everything. Rome wasn't built in a day, and the environment wasn't fixed in a day. But there is more we can do. The functionality of how we vote is it does take 15 minutes for us to vote in the House. Every bill, if there's first of all, it has to be introduced in the House floor. There's some procedure, there's some discussions, and there's always people pro and against for every issue. And then once everything's done, it takes at least 15 minutes to functionally vote a bill. And every year, every day, one of my jobs for the caucus is to help plan the day. There are bills that unfortunately do not get called, sometimes because they're not ready, because an amendment's needed, sometimes because it could be as simple as the chair of the committee was on COVID restrictions and that day couldn't bring out a bill. All sorts of things happen, but we do need to do more, and there's more work to do next year and the year after. And you got
any priorities for next year?
On environment, I was really thrilled this year that the PFABs bill passed and the bottle bill passed. We did ban PFABs from firefighting equipment. That did get signed, and we put especially state dollars behind it to replace the firefighting foam so that we didn't just pass a bill on to our municipalities and fire departments to replace their foam when we made it suddenly said you can't use it anymore. There's a phase-in for that. I think there's more we need to do on polystyrene, styrene, and straws. We still have to do a lot more with that. We have to do so much more. And functionally the money, we have to figure out how to raise a lot of our bridges and roads. It's directly tied to the environment. Climate change is real, and we're going to have to raise bridges. We see that right in Groton Long Point. That bridge, we're talking about redoing it because its end of life is done, but we know when it gets redone, it needs to be raised. And that's $9 million.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be frustrated, but when you have a year like this and the bottle bill goes through, no matter what you're an advocate for, when a bill of that nature goes through, because it did take that long, there's other things that happen. It's a ripple effect to me. Like, so when the town of Groton banned straws, we'd go into a restaurant and they started saying, we're just gonna do paper bags. Well, they started taking kind of their own, legislation led the way, and basically restaurants kind of took the ball and ran with it. The big McDonald's and these big guys are trying to find ways to make their package either with less cardboard, or they're coming up with ways because they know what the future holds, because this legislative action has been happening. So they're getting ahead of it. So again, it takes a long time, and you know what an effort it is to reverse something that we've been doing for probably the last 100 years to our environment. It's gonna take a while, but again, I think when you see a bill like that go through, and to see people, I think what most people don't understand is how close people are tied to these bills. I see the lights when I'm walking out, sometimes somebody still has their head down and they're still working on a bill, and it could be their 4th year. And by the time they come out to bring it out, you don't realize the emotion and the amount. A bottle bill. The guy that I always think in my head was just overwhelmed and looked like he had been through a fight with Mike Tyson at the end of the night after 4 years. And a lot of folks don't understand the work that goes into it. They'll say, I can't believe you guys decided on it. You talked about it for 1 hour. And we're like, we wish. It was 4 years, 36 days in 1 hour. And that's how that bill went through. So again, I never get disappointed because it seems like every year we make that little progress, even though there's a lot of bills that we think should go through, don't. They're in the memory banks for the next year, and they start a new life just a little bit older.
Yeah, and people, like how we're working on that trend study and setting up meetings, I know people are setting up meetings to make sure that they get those bills that didn't make it over the finish line one step closer, because we have so much more work to do.
I appreciate your focus on environment and energy.
And if you have ideas for future bills,
Let us know.
please send them to us so that we can work on them. That goes for everybody, you know. Whether we agree or disagree, at least we can try and come to a playing field where it can help everybody. It's just not our side.
Can I embarrass Dan with his bill that passed through?
I was gonna ask.
Okay.
Okay.
We got one more.
Okay, one more, and then we'll embarrass Dan.
Good evening, I'm Robert Well, I've lived in Groton virtually all my life, except that Uncle Sam thought I should be somewhere else. I've got a suggestion, which is probably more on the administrative end of the government. As you know, there's been $20 million earmarked to build a pedestrian bridge in London to go to a museum that will probably never be built. How about you get that $20 million and apply it to cleaning up the mess the state made at the oral school, so the developer can come in there with a clean slate and not have to build a mega development in order to make a buck on it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your service, and the only thing I'll say something about that is that in our state, projects are all separate, and that's a project that was brought to the attention. We funded it, or it's been
It's
funded.
earmarked, not funded.
Earmarked, not funded, but earmarked money, and they're two separate projects, so I don't see those two as, and again, I think in government, a lot of times we'll say, what about this and what about that? Everything has its own individual life and somehow made it to the floor. But wouldn't be really a possibility to take money from one project like that.
So an earmarked project, well, that's a great idea. An earmarked project, we did not bond for those dollars. Those dollars are not being physically held. If the project goes forward, then those dollars are bonded at that time. So that's just an earmark as a future goal that some people had. And if that happens, if the museum happens, there's a few ifs there, as we all know. Then that project, that 20 million could be bonded at a later date. As far as cleaning up that Mystic Oral School, those are brownfields dollars, which our environmentalists know well. There are state dollars every year appropriated to brownfields to clean up projects that the town, and this currently it's state owned with no use, while people are discussing. If the town, state, or developer, that's where those dollars are bonded out of, is the Brownfields dollars. And we did just get some great Brownfields dollars for other projects in Eastern Connecticut, but as there's no actual use for that project, there certainly is cleanup with every building, especially buildings of that time. There's asbestos, there's lead, there's all the things you'd expect, and the use of those buildings. To reuse those, there will be state Brownfields dollars will have to be looked at, appropriated, bonded, at the time the property is used. If you drive through Route 12 up to Norwich, you'll see the old Norwich State Hospital. Slowly but surely, as the uses are coming up for those buildings, permits are coming, those brownfields dollars are being used to clean up those buildings. Built similar times, similar issues need to happen.
Could you discuss the legal process that follows after SB 919? And for those of you who don't know what SB 919 is, it is an act concerning immunity from criminal prosecution for a minor who possesses alcohol when the minor seeks emergency assistance to prevent the death or serious injury of another person.
That's Dan's bell, it's a great bell.
Dan came out to me 2 years ago? 3 years ago? Yeah, time passes. A lot of our college students across the country, because other reps and senators were approached by college students in their districts about this concept of medical amnesty. And that is if you are in a situation where there are folks who are not of legal age to drink, but someone needs to call 911, you need assistance. What can we do to make sure that the youth or the person who is under age 21 calls 911, does not get arrested for underage drinking? because you don't want someone to not call 911 on their friend or whoever they stumble upon who needs medical assistance because they're worried about getting arrested or detained or a ticket. Or remember, our state schools have state troopers, so you're really getting arrested when you're at UConn when you call for emergency services. So we had wanted to pass that last year. In 2020, COVID cut our session short. In 2021, we passed that through. A lot of college students brought that up. So what that now is in the law of the state of Connecticut, if you call, but a lot of times if people were calling 911, the officers would look the other way and not arrest for possession at an underage. But again, it's law in the books, you're not supposed to possess under 21, so there is a risk of getting arrested. The law is now if you call 911 for medical assistance comes, deals with the person who needs help, takes them away to the ambulance if they need that done, or if it turns out someone doesn't need help, they leave, and the person who calls 911 will not get arrested for the possession. Now, for parents, you're over 21. There are different laws on the books for hosting, for being a social host. So if you do have use or people under 21 on your property, there are still other repercussions. But for the young people who, we've all done stupid things when we were young, or we know people who have, if you were perfect. Please, if you think your friend or you stumble upon someone who needs medical assistance, maybe made a mistake with alcohol, maybe took a drug, maybe didn't know what happened, and possibly someone put something in their drink. If someone needs medical assistance, it does not matter your age, please call 911 and get them medical assistance.
Yeah, some of the arguments you hear when a bill comes out like that, where folks would say, well, these kids are just going to use it as a crutch. Kids, their last thing on their mind is to call the police in that situation. They call the police when they're really afraid that their friend's going to die. That shouldn't be part of the process. Shouldn't be, am I going to jail if I call? It just shouldn't be. I think we all agree on that. And it was a great bill, so congratulations, Dan.
That bill, before that bill, I actually used to have a phone just for kids to call in case of emergencies that were scared to get in trouble for situations like that. And having that, I think, opens a door for those emergency situations for kids to interact with police a little bit easier. And I think that was important when it came to that bill, because now kids aren't refusing to help their friends or just dropping their friends off in certain locations where other people can find them in order for them to get help. So that was really important.
I remember with that UConn student who was dropped off in front of the fire department and they didn't know, and the fire truck came out and ran over the person who was passed out. Like, that's a horrible situation for that family to get that call, when now their friends who knew that person overdrank can just call 911 and get that person the help. And wouldn't you want to get that call as a parent the next morning, mom or dad, I overdrank and I need to be picked up at the hospital, but I'm alive, as opposed to the call that those parents got as your child's deceased.
It just struck me too, so I'm not sure if everybody knows, but Anthony Nolan's a police officer in London, as well as a legislator. I don't know if everyone knows him, because he said his kids have a cell phone.
Cover.
I did. You're not undercover anymore. Sorry about that. But so he has that cell phone where kids can call him direct, and I think that all started with him being a DARE officer, being in the schools and having a relationship with those kids. And I know when they see him in the streets and I'm walking with him, he's like a second dad to a lot of the kids I see in the way they approach him. So we got a good man up here. There's another question. Yep.
Yeah, I know we have one more question. We might have time for one more after that. Is there anybody else who has a lingering question?
I just have one quick question.
Okay. So we will go over here, and then once it hits 8, if anybody still has something that's come to mind and you haven't had a chance to ask it yet, the reps will be here for a few minutes after, so you're welcome to come into them personally.
We have to vacate. All bodies have to be out of this building by 9 p.m. They start cleaning up at 8:30, so we'd like to respect the workers who.
What time is it now?
It is about 5 minutes short of 8, so we want to be out of here by 8:30 to make sure everybody gets to go home on time, so go right ahead.
I'm Richard Marquardt, and my father started a business, but I just wanted everybody to know about this tax. When you run a business, expenses come in hand, and taxes are included. So you're gonna raise your rates for everything, and who's paying? Everybody's paying. So I just wanted everybody to realize that it's not just against the trucks. That's all I got to say. I want people to realize that. And there's gonna be a problem, out-of-state trucks, how are you gonna collect that money from them, so on and so forth. I'm sure it's in the works, but I don't see how it's gonna work out. Because you can't audit somebody in California that's doing business in Connecticut. And how can you tell whether he's telling the truth or not when he drives through Connecticut? That's all I got.
Yeah, you can't really track them. They do have ways, all the big dogs that drive through, all the big trunk companies, DHLs and all those guys in the world, they're gonna report. We understand there's gonna be underreporting. They know that's probably something that's gonna happen. I was a huge toll guy. I think that's the way that it would eventually gonna have to happen one way or the other. I know people don't like to talk about it and they get sticky, but I don't know.
That's one reason you put a handicap on companies in this state, because they're not gonna have to pay that taxes with somebody from other state.
Yeah.
And you might be driving people out of business in this state.
And I think we're already at a disadvantage. I talk about this a lot, but we're at a disadvantage already. I don't know if you folks, if you ever bought a car, there's a destination fee. And if you live right next to the plant in Dearborn, Michigan, it's $1,000 to get your Ford F-150 delivered. It's also $1,000 in Connecticut or California or Hawaii. What they do is they take the destination fees and they add all the trucks, tolls, tax, anything associated with moving those F-150s around the country. Doesn't matter where they go. And they divide it by the amount of F-150 sold, and every single person in every single state pays for it. So you essentially, if that truck, or if any of those taxes were added to that truck as a result of going through a toll in Arizona, in California, and Florida, if any of those are a result of that, you actually physically paid a destination charge that had to do with tolls from another state. Connecticut is at a disadvantage, and I think we're not paying attention to it. It's frustrating for me, because knowing that all this infrastructure money that's coming in, Rhode Island, I think, collected almost $400 million since they put the tolls on. Any dollar you get, if you take $200 million in, that's $1 billion at the federal level. $800 million comes from the federal government if you're fixing I-95. So we're not in the best position. Our STF fund is drained, essentially going to be bankrupt in a few years. We don't have that kind of money to back it. I think we'll be bonding, that's for sure, and it'll be just borrowed money, and we'll go it alone until we get a little bit of backbone here in our state and join our colleagues across the lines and put some tolls up. But again, I know how frustrating it is. I know it is.
Okay, any questions from anybody who hasn't asked one yet, just before I, okay.
Last question of the night. You
Last
have the
question.
honors.
Wow, lucky me.
You won a lot.
I
Look
was
at
gonna
the
say-
seat. You might not want to.
Yeah, I'll buy one after this. Joe, just a question on those voting, early voting, the white box issue there. Are those gonna be boxes that are monitored all the time, or are they gonna be at the?
They weren't monitored this
So
time.
they're currently locked, they're not, in between now, it's not a voting season for our towns. We're not voting. When it's time to vote, when the absentee ballot line starts, the person in charge of the election comes out and they unlock, so you can actually put things in there.
They what?
They unlock the boxes, the top part, so you can enter and drop something in there. Right now, those white boxes are still there.
Oh.
But you can't put anything in there.
Oh, you can't
They're
put it.
closed from the
Okay,
inside.
so people couldn't just throw
No.
a load of votes in there?
Well, there's nothing to vote on right now.
Right, but I
Let's be
mean,
clear,
if
there's
it was
nothing
voting time, they can't just stuff a whole bunch in there.
And then each community decided where to put their box as to their needs. So some communities chose to keep their boxes indoors because they had issues with theft issues.
But during the voting season,
During the
Right.
time that absentee ballots are allowed,
right, and are those boxes monitored at that point? Like if they're outside, if I go to Butler School, would that box be monitored?
every day they're checked, and if you vote in Groton, there is a ballot box in Groton Town Hall, and that's where it is.
The
So
They
once-
check every day.
Once a day.
They're not stuffed.
Once
Well,
a day,
yeah.
they empty them.
And
And
then
there's
the ballots are looked, now remember, you have to sign the outside of your ballot.
Yeah.
and you receive, the outside envelope has your name on it. So you can't, if you, let's say my name is John Smith, if 2 John Smiths at the address turn in that ballot, that can't happen.
So you as John Smith have to request the ballot,
Yes.
Yes.
and then they verify your identity? How?
Well, you request it through mail, they mail it to your home,
They mail
and
it
then you fill it out and send it back in. So it's a 2-step process, and again, back to even in the voting thing, I mean, I've been elected official on the RTM, on the council, in our country, and unfortunately in our country and in our region, we don't have a problem with people overvoting. We have, like, we're a 55-60% voting country, which is almost obscene, but stuff in the boxes, you'd have to take all your neighbors and mail them in, and then remember, there's still a Republican and Democrat registrar of voters who takes those and crosses them off. And if they're crossing off the same name and they go, oh, we got the 3rd vote for Joe Dela Cruz, they don't just go, okay, 1, 2, 3 for him.
Right.
They call and say, okay, there's a problem.
It's a good system.
It is, I think it works.
We have a good system.
But at Butler, do you happen to know what's gonna happen in that Butler school?
I think everyone's gonna be voting for voting purposes, I think you're gonna be voting at Cutler.
I mean, is there gonna be houses or anything in there, do you know?
That's gonna be up to the council, whoever the future council is, and a lot of those properties, it's contentious sometimes, that's in the middle of a neighborhood,
Oh, yeah,
buried, so I'm not quite sure what would happen at school, but who knows?
okay.
That's gonna be, I'd be talking to town councilors and folks about that, and first go to the neighbors, that is one of the ones that I think is so unique, because it's completely engulfed in a neighborhood.
Oh, it is, the dead center, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, for the
Yeah, that would
Thank
be
you.
a great spot for houses, park, there's a lot of great things that can be repurposed in that. And for folks watching at home, when a school closes in this town, I think it's the same in most towns, but I'll say, I definitely know how it works in this town. The Board of Ed can retain the building.
Oh, they can?
They can. So they've said, Board of Ed has said for Mary Morrison School on Tollgate Road, they're gonna retain that for robotics use, storage use, and kind of see how the population in this town goes, with apartments that are being built nearby, more subs being assigned here. Board of Ed is gonna hold on to that school property, it won't be used for school for the next couple of years, but they're not turning it over to the town.
So the Board of Ed being separate from the town?
Yes. Once the Board of Ed decides they don't need a piece of property, they turn it over to the town, and then town council gets to handle the property as to what they want to do. Of course, our zoning officials, planning and zoning has a high say, as do water, if there's watershed issues in the property, all those safety nets with zoning, watershed, environmental issues still happen once property gets turned over to the town before anything happens to it. So if you're worried about a property nearby, because we had development at the property next door to my house, I was so impressed with how our planning and zoning was when they heard issues that neighbors have, when watershed issues were brought up. There's a lot of steps, and if you're worried about a piece of property, follow your town council, follow your planning and zoning, look at the watershed, because there's opportunities for public comment at all these meetings. Sometimes you don't hear about something until the construction trucks show up, and you feel like, I wish I could have said something 2 years ago when this was being discussed.
Chris hit the development property lottery because she got a Mike's fame, a Jersey Mike's and a Chipotle in walking distance now. But you know, you never know what's going to happen to your property next door. But I tell everyone to just get involved early, and you know that's where it really counts. If you know a school's going out, and I know SB Butler, I'm sure those neighbors are going to be out in force early. But just make sure that.
You did a good job on the council school, I know you did a lot of work there.
I gotta tell you, I can't. I think the most proud I am of anything is the work that we did. We were council and RTM and the hundreds of other people that were involved in.
You were all involved.
Oh, doing the school construction here. Anthony wasn't. Anthony. We got a lot going on in London too. But to know that when I first moved to Groton, we had 14 schools. 14. After this is all done, I think we'd be down to 8 schools in the town of Groton, which reduced labor and concentrated, resources. And I think we're in a good path for our schools.
And who would have thought when that was coming through that we were so pleased to have the middle school with the fresh state-of-the-art ventilation? None of us thought COVID was going to be necessary, but to know that our kids are in these newer buildings with AC and better ventilation is so important these days.
Yeah, locally we got to work on it, and then statewide we got
got
to vote on the funding. So it was pretty cool, fulfilling. So
thank you everyone for coming out. We'll stick around. We'll keep folks on the time. so that the employees of this building get to leave at the appropriate time because they've all had long days. But thank you for coming. If you have things or you're watching this and things pop up, please call, email, talk to us about what's important.
Thank you, guys.